Hello and welcome to the Aid Station. I'm Chris Robb, and today we travel to Prague in the Czech Republic. And it's wonderful to catch up with an old friend, Paulo Passos Leite, who is the GM of Blue Orange. Wonderful to see you, Paulo. How are you?
Hey, Chris. Great. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be on the show. It looks like you found a new purpose yourself. Fantastic
Yeah,
job. Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, it's wonderful. I'm loving it. And meeting up with new people and people like yourself. I've kind of lost track of. We first met in. We were in Rome, weren't we, when we were working on the City Chase project, which I'm thinking must be 10, 12 years ago now. You're better at dates than me. How long ago was that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was 2007, I believe.
Okay.
So around 12 years, something like that. That's right.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful times. So why don't we kick off with, you've got an amazing story. You've been kind of all over the world. I can't do it justice. South America, Europe, born in Portugal. Tell us your story of the Paulo story, please.
Sure. You know, Chris, I think that I've always been in sport. I think like any kid at a young age, I first got a soccer ball. So I think I started with soccer like any kid in Europe or like most kids in Europe. And then one day we had a demonstration in our school. I think I was around 10 for judo. And that was my first sport that I did for real with a coach and, competition. So I started with judo. And from judo, I moved to high school, and in high school, I got to know volleyball, and I just fall in love. I fell in love with volleyball, and I had to make a decision of staying with volleyball and judo or going with one or the other, and I decided to go with volleyball. So I started playing volleyball, and at the age of 19, we moved to Brazil. My mom was a diplomat, and she was stationed in Rio, and we moved to Brazil. And I was fortunate enough to meet some of the greatest ever volleyball players in Brazil, a golden age in Brazil, and some of the most amazing players I've ever seen. And 4 years later, I moved to LA, to Los Angeles in California to go study, and I kept going with volleyball. And as I was studying and I was going and working, looking for things to do, not really sure what I wanted to do, I got into nightlife promotion. So we started to promote a nightclub. And so the promotional gene was already there.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I loved sports, and I was starting to promote. I was doing stuff that we are doing now that had different wording. We were doing fan engagement, brand experience, and brand activation in a different way, but we were doing it. At that time, the World Wide Web wasn't around yet when we started, but well, it came around in 1990, so it was starting. So our promotion was based on flyers, doing launch parties at restaurants that were partners to us, and stuff like that. So we were doing a lot of stuff, a lot of the things that we do now, but we called it different names, but we're already doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And without realizing it, with this organizational gene that I had, I started organizing sports events and volleyball tournaments and foot volleyball tournaments, which is a sport played in Brazil very much. And so I got into organizing events since 89, 90, I think, without realizing I was doing it. And after 7 years in LA, I moved back to Brazil, and I worked a few years in the stock market, kind of lost, sports was always the thing that I liked, and going back and forth. And my mom used to say, work with sports. Why don't you work with sports? And, I used to tell my mom, but, that's what I like. That's my hobby. That's what I like. And what my mom saw in me was the passion I had for sports. Mm-hmm. And she realized that that's where I was happy. And so she kept pushing me, why don't you work with sports? And the truth is that, I kept doing other stuff and organizing sports. And that's where I felt the happiest, for sure. So moving forward, in 2004, I went to Portugal to participate in the Triathlon World Championships at the Madeira Islands. And I was just astounded with the whole event, the organization. And I think a light came on, and I said, why shouldn't I do this for a job, for a living? So that's when I started to take it seriously. And in 2004, I did the World Championships Triathlon as an athlete. And in 2005, we had the first event. So this was an unprofitable event. And what we did was a giant triathlon from the south to the north of Portugal in 4 days. And it was a huge success. And as a result of that, I decided to open the company in Portugal in 2005. It didn't actually open until January 2006 because of Texas. It was better to open in January 2006 to organize one event, the Lisboa Triathlon. And what I can tell you is that I realized that I was doing the right thing when I was working in sports. When the whistle blew for the first event in 2006 for the Lisboa Triathlon, I had to put my sunglasses on. I was crying like a baby. So I was sure that I found my purpose, and that was in the right place and doing the right thing. Wow. So this is the short story how I got to the event industry, to the sports industry.
Wow, what a great story! What a wonderful story. Thanks for sharing that. And we're also lucky in this industry to so many of us do what we love. And so now you find yourself in Prague. You're living there. You've got your business still in Portugal. COVID-19 kind of lockdown. What's life like now for you?
Well, I have a young 5-year-old daughter. She lives in Prague with her mom, and she lives here since she was born. And, I would come see her every month. I would fly to Prague. So the past 5 years, I've been coming to Prague to see my daughter, but it wasn't enough. I have first and foremost, I have to be a father, and I have to be a father before I can be anything else. And I couldn't think of anything else but that. So I had to make this move to come to Prague, but with my heart full, I made a decision to come here. I see the market, Chris, and you and myself, I've organized events all over the world. In Brazil, I've organized events in Morocco, in Italy, in Argentina, Spain, a ton of events. So I've organized events all over the world, and the truth is that for me, I see that the market is global. Most of the job that we do, we can do remotely. We have to be in place to deliver the event, obviously, but we can do remotely. We can do from almost anywhere. Mm-hmm. And if anything, COVID-19 just proved to us that we can do that. And we can meet and negotiate and talk to people anywhere in the world. So the decision to come here for me was very easy. And, it happened at the right moment. And the truth is that I got here in January, and to get my temporary residence, that actually it's temporary for 10 years, but to get my temporary residence, it's a process. It's not too complicated because I'm, a European citizen, so it was an easy process. But I got it just before the day they closed the service. So I moved here when I had to.
That's obviously a bit of an omen. You got it the day before they closed the service. So it was meant to happen, huh?
So yeah, so it looks like I was preparing myself to be, to be in this situation. We were planning to go remotely. Obviously, I meet with the team and talk to the team on a regular basis, and we have people in Portugal and people in Brazil. But we're doing just fine. The key thing, I think, is to keep everybody motivated. And I have 4 very simple principles in business and how I conduct my business. And number 1 is that I see myself in a leading role. And what I think is that what I realize is that I have to work for my team. They don't work for me, but I work for them. Mm-hmm. I need to create the best conditions for them to deliver. So my role is to deliver. That's the number 1, is I work for them. They don't work for me. The second one is I don't really care when they work. if it's a girl, if she goes to the beach with her kid, it doesn't matter to me if she starts at 9 or finishes at 11. Of course, when there's a job that needs to be done on a certain specific time, it needs to get done at that time. But I think that people need to manage their life, and their life needs to come before work. And if that happens, if you're successful at giving them that space, they will produce more. They will be happier. Mm-hmm. So for me, time management, putting the time management in their hands is the second rule. The third rule is I always look for people that are better than me to work with me. And lastly, but not least, if I can, give them a piece of the business. So these are the rules I try to follow. So for me, working remotely and working with them, I don't see it as a problem.
That's wonderful. And no better time to test that principle than during COVID-19, as you say, where everyone's remote. They're not getting down to the beach with the children, but managing the children, and as you know, I've got a 5-year-old who will probably come and knock on that door in 5 minutes and say it's time to go and fly the kite or do something like that. So fun times for everyone. So, I mean, amazing leadership story that you've shared there, and some principles that would probably be different to many other leaders. Is that something that you came up with from, it was a learning from another leader, or it's something that you've created yourself over the years? And who do you follow as a leader who's taught you some great leadership skills over the time?
Well, Chris, I think that it's about feeling what's right and what's wrong. And most definitely that you learn things with time. If there's one thing that I've learned is to be humbled and to ask for help. Mm-hmm. I think it's extremely powerful when you ask for help. Yeah. It's powerful for the person you ask for help from and for yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think it takes you to another level when you recognize that you need help and you ask for it. So, we've all faced a different challenge. And I think that having to deal with these problems that we all face, hard times in business. I've had difficult times in business. I remember when we launched the Lisboa Triathlon in Portugal in 2006, the break even was 500 athletes, and we had the first year 178 athletes. So it was a total financial. A long way off, huh? But, right after the race, the venue that we were doing an event that we closed down all the streets. The athletes couldn't believe in what we were doing. And right after the race, the venue came up to us and said, listen, what an amazing job. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. We are stunned with what you did, and we're super happy, and we want you to keep going. And that, was a boost of energy. Had a tough time financially starting. So I think being humbled by all these facts is what gets you to the conclusion of what's the right path. And one thing that I try to do in every event that we organize, and the mass participation, we work with a lot of volunteers. And one thing that I make a point of doing is going and talking to the volunteers the first day and to greet them. And because you know how it is when the event is going, you just don't have the time to talk to anyone. Mm-hmm. You are troubleshooting most of the event. So I make a point of coming out and telling them that, we're all the same. We have different roles on the event, but nobody is better than anybody. And, respect for others is very, very important.
That's so true, that, isn't it? I mean, you're only as good as your weakest link out there, and your volunteers Absolutely. Do so much. And so, in terms of ending, you've got a very inspiring story. What you've achieved and where you've been and so on. What inspires you? Have you got something inspiring that you'd love to share with the viewers to end on, please?
Sure. I knew you were going to ask this question. So I wrote a couple of lines down. If you don't mind, I'm going to read them to you. Yeah. So here we go. I need my glasses for this. So here we go. Okay. So, it looks like the world has slowed down, and yet it's moving much faster. It looks like we're further apart, but yet we're much closer. In just one lifetime, we went to the moon. Wildlife declined 60%. World population during the 20th century alone has grown from 1.65 billion to 6 billion. The World Wide Web and mobile phones were introduced, and on and on. In just 50 years, this happened. I feel as we have been given a second chance. The planet is healing, we are healing, people are looking for purpose and more meaning in their lives that no material goods can provide. Sometimes we need to get sick before we feel better. I wish for that once we are allowed outside, we will all prefer the world that we'll find than the one we left behind. What we want and what we need already exists. Sometimes, and now a quote from Miles Davis to end, sometimes it takes a long time to learn how to play like yourself.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. You've obviously put a lot of thought into that, and that's hugely inspiring. What a great note to end on, Paulo. Thank you so much for that and for your time. Look forward to the time that we catch up together again, hopefully in Prague or in Portugal. I love both of those countries, but thank you so much. I wish you all the best over the next few months and years.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for inviting me to be on.